I get the privilege of sitting with Alexandra Haider, one of my great friends. I want to say student, but I think I learned as much from her as I hope she learns from me. We get to spend this time together. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
These things start with a word, and I've got a special word that is going to need some explanation. You ready? Okay. All right, right out of the gate. The word for this podcast is agreement. And I think as people get to know you more through this podcast, it'll become more clear why I picked that word. But let me put this bow around it. The word agreement in the context of our conversation today is that I view you as somebody who much of your success is because you are so in line with what you do. The what you do and who you are mesh perfectly. And I think there was a day, not to tell your story, but maybe you'll tell it, where that what you did wasn't necessarily in sync with who you are. And so that conflict doesn't allow for high achievement. It doesn't allow for sustainability. It doesn't allow for energy untold, because there's this friction going on between who you are and what you do every day. And I think philosophically about this kind of from everybody's perspective, it begs the question of, do you have internal agreement with who you are and what it is you do every day? And when you find that agreement, that's when the sky's the limit, I believe. Okay, so there's our word, all right? And from there, I want you to take me way back, and I want you to talk to me, talk to everybody about your childhood and the influences you had, your parents, the lessons and hardwiring that was installed when you were a young girl.
Okay. So thanks for the introduction. Yeah, basically since I can remember, I was involved in some way or shape or form in real estate with my parents. So my dad owned an asbestos abatement company, very blue collar. When he and my mom got married, she joined him and they operated it together. Essentially, all of the money they made there, my dad took and he invested it into real estate. Everything they bought in cash, and they bought a portfolio of student rentals in Eau Claire and Menominee area. And so they were all student rentals. So in those school districts, the school, when they rented, aligned both of those, Eau Claire and Menominee. And so there was basically a week where every single year students would move out, and then as a family we'd go in and we'd work on these properties. As kids, we were helping clean and, doing the yard, that sort of thing, and my parents were doing a lot of the maintenance and fixing items, stuff like that. And it was a really long week, and it kind of became tradition, though. So we'd, start morning until night, and as a family, we'd go through and we'd not all tenants left, but all the tenants who did, we'd go and we'd clean up those units, and then on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And it was a pretty tiring week, and my parents would not accept us complaining about it. This is their business and our business, and we worked on it. And, then afterwards we'd go and get dinner together as a family, or, hang out. It wasn't horrible, but I did grow up doing that, and I'm glad I did.
Did you ever ask the question at that time of why student rentals? Why did they choose to go that direction?
I never knew anything different. And so, they do actually, my mom still owns us one 8-plex that's not student rentals, but I know that they didn't like nearly as much. They liked the student rentals because they felt they had student loans and parents that were paying for the rent, and they were more dependable as far as paying rent with residential properties. I kind of learned that later on, though. As a kid, it was just what it was, and I didn't think to question that. You know, it was just, I didn't even realize really necessarily like student rentals were a different kind of sort of property in some ways than traditional residential.
The other thing you said was that your dad and mom, they paid cash for these.
Yeah.
And so did they look at this sort of like their long-term savings account? This was their retirement account?
That's exactly. Yep. So they did not, you know, they did not grow their portfolio to the magnitude they could have had they not invested everything in cash. But they didn't want any risk. My dad was a firm believer in, you know, paying in cash and not having debt. And, you know, I'm different from that today, but I think it's respectable and I understand it. And no, I mean, that's just what it was.
So the lessons, the isms, as it were, you said there was no complaining. This is what we're doing.
Yep.
Give me some of the lessons today that serve you. In other words, the hardwiring that was a part of your youth, your raising, that those isms that you really believe still today and that serve you every day. Let's start with those.
Yeah. So thinking back to things that really stood out for me, actually something crazy that I will never forget was one time I was cleaning out this, like a porch area, and there was a big spider there, and I was like, you know, I got it all, but there's a spider there, and I'm not going to get it. And my dad was like, no, you're staying there until you kill the spider. And I remember like crying, and I had the paper towel, and he's like, let's get going, kill the spider. And so like pushing through, I guess, things I really didn't want to do. And I remember cleaning out like old beer cans that smelled bad. Actually, at that time, I thought that's how beer just smelled. And I was like, I am never drinking. It smelled like rotten old beer. But really, we worked together as a family, and we went through, and I think it was just hard work and not thinking. My parents never thought they were above anything. And you know, never was a problem too small for them, or my dad and mom did well for themselves, but they were just in there cleaning in our crappy clothes with their kids. And I admire that about my parents, and I hope that my kids end up being, you know, like, I don't really do tenant turnarounds so much myself anymore, but probably when I have kids, I'll start doing some of them again.
Right.
I think it was a really...
Just so they would learn that.
Yeah, because it was, you know, we got through it, and it looked great when we were done. And yeah, it's kind of gross and hard, but it was a good thing to be, to live through, I think.
Can you think of anything, Alexandra, that as an adult you look at the belief systems, at the hardwiring that's installed, that you've had to remodel? As an adult, you look at it and go, okay, I know I was raised that way, but I'm going to remodel this, or I'm going to change some things about how I was raised. What comes to mind that way? For
sure. Well, one thing is I started off trying to do everything myself, or with Mike, who was at the time my boyfriend. And you do limit yourself there. So you're only one person or two people, or, you know, a few people with you, and you really can't grow to the size that even like that I'm at now. Also, there's people who do enjoy the things that you don't enjoy. And so forcing yourself to do those things for me now is not something that I choose to do. However, I do appreciate that if something comes up and I'm right there and I'm in the middle of it, I can. But yeah, I don't do it exactly how they do, where I'm not going through and doing everything myself. I'm not the maintenance person for my properties. But yeah, so that's something that is different.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. That depending on how much you want to grow, how big a portfolio you want to have, at a certain point, you'll hit a limit to
Yeah.
where you just can't do everything. Even if you loved doing everything, you just can't. If your goals exceed that one person or two person effort.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Yeah. So I think that that's definitely a lesson. And so this raising led you into college where you studied English. Explain, who goes to college to study English?
Well, not me, actually. So when I first went to college, I thought I was maybe I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I was going to college. So when I was looking through the options, I decided I wanted to be a veterinarian because I liked animals. So initially I was in school in like a pre-vet course. I was taking like animal sciences and chemistries, that sort of thing. And then I remember my dad telling me, "You don't want your hand up a cow's butt all day." And I was like, well, no. And so I was like, maybe not a veterinarian. I don't know why he like had in his head that's all they did, but and so anyways, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I was really struggling because honestly I didn't know. Like I liked criminology, I kind of liked some of those things. I liked the idea of maybe being a school counselor and helping people in that way. I decided against a counselor after talking with people who knew me. They were kind of saying like they thought that I would go home with those problems and not really like maybe not be able to be happy myself because of all the problems I'm surrounding myself with. And so I decided not to do that. And so really I was at the point where either I was going to quit until I figured out what I wanted to do, quit school, or I was going to figure it out. And so I was like, I guess I'll be a teacher. I also thought I wanted to coach. And so I thought that those two jobs would, work well together. And so when I was trying to figure out what type of teacher I wanted to be, I talked with my dad and he was like, well, pick a core subject because you'll always have a job. Math is what I'm best at, but I overdid it in high school and I was kind of just like turned off to it. Science, I already did all those animal science classes and everything, and I decided I wanted to switch completely, so I chose the other core subject, which is English. I am not like a poetry person. Some of those classes, I was like, we're reading too much into some things. But I chose English. So finished it out with an English degree, went and got a master's in education, became a teacher, actually prior to my master's, but I got my teaching license and then a master's. And never was it, this is for sure what I want to do with my life. It was, I have to figure something out because I have to move forward. And so that's what I stepped into. Yeah.
And I think that there's a distinction right there. A lot of people, they stop the car until they know exactly where they're going. And I think that by being in motion is when you discover maybe what you don't want or where you don't want to be.
Yeah.
But you don't know that by just stopping. You've got to keep it in motion. And then you discover while in motion. And so English teacher, coach of track.
I coached track, cross country, my last year tennis. And
so some would say that, wow, you've got a master's in English, you've got a teaching job, you're coaching, all of that for some would be achievement. That would be a huge accomplishment and they would stay there forever and feel great about it. But there was something that wasn't right about that with you. And walk me through that.
So more than teaching, what I wanted to do was help students who needed help and be a mentor type figure, or for people who didn't have maybe the best parents, be somebody who could be support for them. So my first 2 years, I was in a really urban, high poverty district, and honestly, it was really hard. There was a lot of students that English was not their first language, or they just came over from a bunch of different countries, and like Somalia, did not speak any English or barely any. And so trying to teach classrooms with these different levels of even being able to speak English was really difficult. After my second year, so during my second year, I remember during my breaks, like turning off my lights in my classroom you have a break period, and just sitting in there and then looking at real estate on my computer. And just like the idea of being able to own something and get some income from that. I wanted a 2 to 4 unit property to move into one and then get income. And it was like, I had such high stress, honestly, in my classroom. I felt like I was being pulled in a million different directions. I wasn't necessarily able to, I guess, even discipline in the way that I believed was the best way, but also like you have such different backgrounds for these kids that I understand, you know, it's not the same for everybody. And it was not what I wanted to do. And after my second year, basically halfway through my second year, I told my parents, I don't want to teach anymore. I probably had just gotten my master's. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I know you guys helped me a lot. They helped me a lot with my school. But this is not what I want to do. And they were like, try a different school district and just see if it is what you want. And so my third year, I did teach at a much higher achieving school, and it just still was not for me. And so I was still looking for properties and started working a lot with a realtor. We were offering a ton on 2 to 4 unit properties, and I started to get to know him really well. I was, of course, able to put 3% down. I wasn't as competitive as like an investor would have been for those properties, and we were struggling and we couldn't get any accepted offers. And also my price point was low. So I think I was one of, you know, there would be 12, 15 offers on these on-market properties I was offering with my realtor. And so after months and months and months of offering, I remember one time I was getting into my car to go home, and my realtor was like, Alexandra, can I talk to you for a second? I was like, yeah, what's up? And he was like, I really think you should like get into real estate. And I was like, yeah, like I'm trying to. He's like, no, you should become a realtor. I think you'd be really good at it. And it was always fun for me as a realtor going around with him. And I loved the idea of being able to like take my commission and use it towards a down payment, that sort of thing. And so I talked it over with my family. And my dad actually was under the impression that realtors are despicable. And so told me that. I was like, okay, Dad, whatever. I'm not going to be. And I guess he had some bad experiences. I don't know. And so anyways, I decided I was going to do that part-time and also teach part-time because I wasn't sure I wanted to quit teaching yet, and I wanted to feel out being a real estate agent. And so that summer, I did summer school, and I also worked at a restaurant, and then I was a realtor, and I loved it. And I was able to build clients quickly and starting to see some like off-market deals. And I knew within even a couple of weeks that I loved real estate, and I loved being a real estate agent and the freedom that came with it. I mean, I remember my summer school was half days, and so I remember going to Coldwell Banker where I worked first and being able to just walk to lunch and like be there for as long as I wanted to be. And it was just unbelievable to me. And as a teacher, you can't have your phone out. You're basically like a student, right? And like being able to take calls or make calls or whatever I wanted to do, honestly, the freedom of it was just crazy to me. And being able to walk and go get a coffee, like things that now I still, you know, it's just I don't even think about it. But at the time I remember being like, this is amazing. Like, this is lives that people live.
I have been in jail
I
till
have
now.
been, yes. You know, I never had a window in my classroom. I literally didn't have a window. And, you know, then I went to this lifestyle where it was so much more flexible. And yeah, you work hard, and as an agent, you know, like you're driving around a lot, and a lot of your time is taken, of course, but you choose it, and I loved it so much more. So I was done teaching at that point. I got my first commission check exactly 2 weeks after my last paycheck. So I never had like this big lag, which is good because I had a couple $1,000s saved, you know, and
Right.
was paying rent at the time. And then I got my first investment property shortly after.
So just to timestamp that now, Oh, thanks, Jorge.
Thanks.
That's about, I'm going to say about 4 years ago. But do you remember exactly the?
So that was at this point now about 5 years ago.
About five.
Yep.
5 years ago.
Yep.
And to me, just I could pause right there and go, I think I see people almost every week who have lost passion for where they are, or maybe they never had it, but they're doing something they're not passionate about. And I think, how can that be? How do you stay there? How do you just keep grinding it out?
Yeah.
And I think that what you said earlier about on your break, where you turn the lights off and you'd be sitting there on your computer looking at real estate, it was almost like it was a recharge.
It was.
It's like, to get me through this day, I'm going to like do something that is fun, that I enjoy.
Yep.
And you know, wouldn't it be amazing, and of course is now for you, that if every day you did something that you felt wasn't taking from you, but energizing you?
Yeah.
That difference, I can't even imagine how you could miss that. Once you've seen it, there are those things that take from you and those things that energize you. And choosing to be in something that energizes you.
Yeah.
Okay, so here you are. 5 years ago, you hadn't yet bought your first property.
Yep.
Right? And let's just fast forward, and then we're going to go back to the middle. So approximately from 0 square feet owned 5 years ago to approximately how many square feet do you own? And if you don't own it still, in other words, own currently plus the square foot you've sold that you did own, but now you've sold it.
Around 500,000 square feet.
About 500,000 square feet.
Yep.
And just for people that can't even picture what that looks like, I mean, just for fun, this hangar's, if you rounded it off, it'd be about 4,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be like, 125 of these hangars of real estate owned in 5 years, under 5 years.
Yeah.
So therein lies the next part of our.
And I still think it's super fun. So.
And you love it. I know.
Yep.
Alexandra, I've been blessed to, have amazing people at Power Players. I've been blessed to have a kitchen of TAs that are just exceptional and work one-on-one with people. But I have to tell you that I could name, even among all of those people, just a couple handfuls of people who truly, day in and day out, their love for this sport just comes out of their pores. They love it. It's what they would do for fun. It's like, oh my God, I just can't wait to go look at this property.
Yeah.
In the world of hunting dogs, your tail's been wagging ever since, it feels like, right? And so that's that word agreement. Like when something really agrees with you, it's not work. It's just enjoyment. It's passion.
Yeah.
And it's not that it doesn't get intense sometimes and frustrating times, but you're in the mix of what you love to do. And that's, to me, that is a part of the component of success. It's what creates success. Knowing that this is what I do and what I do so well and what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
I remember watching a clip, like a YouTube clip. It was an interview with Steve Irwin before he passed away, the crocodile.
Yep.
And everybody has seen him, but I remember this clip. Somebody asked him this question, and he said something to the effect that the reason I exist is for the cause of animals. it. That's why I'm here. And it was just like, talk about agreement.
Yeah. He
Talk
found
about
his thing.
knowing what you're supposed to do and that you love it. You're passionate about it. Wow. What a challenge. Okay. So now I want to talk about these 5 years. What's the best deal you've done in 5 years? Walk me through the best. Let's start with the best.
I would probably say the best deal that I've done was probably the first strip mall I ever purchased. I purchased it. So actually, I had my eye on this deal. It was my first one. And so I did not yet, when I first saw it, I was in no place to, I wouldn't say I was in no place to purchase one, but I was in no place to envision myself purchasing a strip mall yet. It's 77,000 square feet. But it was in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I knew where it was well. I knew the stores in there, the restaurants, everything like that well. I'm from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, so it was super familiar to me. And I kept seeing it on, like online commercial sites like Crexy. And it had a land lease in place. And so I had called on it briefly, 19 years left in a land lease. Mm-hmm. At that time, I did not really understand that very well. It seemed a little bit daunting. It was a bigger project than I had done yet. I was not yet really, I guess I had some commercial buildings, but they were much smaller or mixed use where there was apartments there as well. And so for months, I didn't say anything to anybody about it. I, briefly reached out to the broker there and I just kind of watched it. And then I remember I was on vacation with my family, and I was sitting there with my brother, and I was like, Jake, have you seen this deal in Eau Claire? And I showed it to him. And he also had not yet purchased any big commercial like that. And so we were looking at it, and we're running our numbers, and I'm like, I just think it makes so much sense, but there's this land lease here, so what does that mean? And so we did some more research into it, and we understood that essentially somebody else owned the land and we were only going to be buying the building. Okay, well, that's not really financeable because there's only 19 years left on this. So we would have to figure something out. We'd probably have to extend the land lease or purchase the land. Call the broker. There's no way he'd sell the land, but he'd be open to extending for another 30 years. And so then Jake and I are like, this is really exciting. Like, I think we could make this work. But still very inexperienced with, this sort of deal. I didn't even know you yet. Mm-hmm. And so a mentor of mine and another partner, Rafiq Moore, who's another power player and somebody who really helped me with my career, I was like, Jake, let's call Rafiq and see if he's interested to do it with us. And so I showed him the deal and my numbers and everything. He's like, I love it. I'm game. We have to figure out this, like the portion of the land lease. So we end up getting to a point, we have it in our purchase agreement that we will sign contingent upon them extending the land lease for another 30 years. I believe it was 30. It may have been 50, which they were going to agree to. And a few weeks before closing, he still hadn't signed, the seller of the land. And then the broker calls me. He's like, I have really bad news. He's not there. You don't want to extend the land lease anymore. And we were already told there's no way they would sell. And so I was like, oh, no, the deal's dead. So we all kind of thought the deal was dead. We're reaching out to the seller of the land, trying to communicate. Our broker is reaching out for us, everything. Well, finally, the guy returns, his attorney it gets in contact with us and lets us know that he would sell it for $1.2 million to us, which was at a 10 cap. They were paying $120,000 a year for that land. So suddenly, the deal became a way better deal because we were able to simultaneously purchase the land and the mall. And so we weren't going to be stuck with this land lease. We were able to buy everything. And so now we're really excited. Well, now the sellers don't want to sell it anymore. So they're saying, well, you still have to close on time or we're not going to close. And so
the sellers of the building.
They wanted to keep the building now.
Right.
Yes.
Now that you've talked the owner out of the land.
Yeah,
right.
because they were worried themselves about this 19-year limit. So we're kind of scrambling a little bit, but luckily we had Rafiq there. And so Jake and I had raised already with private investors $400,000, $500,000, and $200,000. So we raised $1.1 million, and then Rafiq knew a private lender who was able to borrow us the other $1.1 million. So we were able to close on time, and we did. So we purchased it for 2.2.
Land and building. It was 50% vacant. Within 6 months, it was at 100% occupancy. It was stabilized. We paid off all of our private investors. We each took $100,000, and then we started cash flowing. And we've gotten offers for close to 4 times what we bought it for already, but we haven't sold. And it's cash flowing really well, and I love it. And my mom's there driving by, like checking on things for us. Checking the dumpster, make sure it's okay.
She does that.
I know,
she has done that.
Yep, right.
She should not be doing that. But yeah, it's been an amazing deal, and really, I actually spoke about it. I did a speaking at a North Star conference. It's like our MLS. And I talked about this deal there. When I spoke, it was my first commercial deal. And afterwards, I had a bunch of people come up to me and offer right there on that deal. They were like, you were able to negotiate the land lease? And a bunch of people actually wanted it. And we had owned it for, at that point, maybe like a month, I think. And people were already offering like double what we bought it for. So it was a good buy.
So much to unpack and learn out of that I know you've done over time. But the land lease, that negotiating the dirt.
Yep.
That was the winner. Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah. Yeah. Land leases are really an interesting animal all by themselves. And you can see from an owner's perspective why they would like to do that. And certain properties, there's no negotiating around that. Like for example, this hangar.
Right.
It's a condominium hangar. It's on a land lease, but it's with a county airport. They don't sell county airports.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yep.
But you can navigate with the lease and the extension, and so you'll get your useful life out of it for sure. But it still isn't the same as owning the dirt underneath you.
Yeah.
So tremendous. Tell me about the deal that has given you the most challenge, and perhaps maybe some of the lessons you learned out of that. Maybe you pick
know which
one.
deal this is.
I have a feeling it's going to be Slayton.
Yes.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's walk through Slayton.
Okay. So my brother and I can't blame him for this. I found the deal. I was like, Chick, this is a great deal. Want to do it with me? And he was like, sure, I trust you. No, I'm just kidding. So there was a deal, Western Minnesota, about 3 hours from me, and great price per foot. But in a very small town in the middle of nowhere, nearby, I own no properties. And, there's a pizza ranch in the town. And so we bought a 23-unit apartment complex. We had one really big, I guess we were blindsided with how bad the plumbing was there. We had an inspection, but the water there is super hard. And so all of the plumbing there was just a mess. And so Jake and I had planned a certain amount of money for capital expenditures and, renovating and where we could get the rents. What we didn't plan was for these major plumbing issues everywhere and all the time. Not to mention, we also had tenants flushing down the towels you clean cars with, cat litter. We had tenants that were just doing things that they did not understand, were just destroying this already destroyed plumbing. And so we had to spend a lot more money on that. We had to self-manage it because we could not find a management company out there. And yeah, I mean, it was so much time that we put into that property. Jake and I remember we still owned it last Christmas. And I remember Christmas Eve at maybe like 2:00 in the morning, getting a phone call that the pipes burst, the water burst. And so there was no water. And not to mention, we had boiler heat. So it's like negative 40 degrees in this middle, like this flatland, just winds gusting like crazy. And we don't have heat for our tenants or water. And so Jake and I are trying to call around. No one's answering. It's Christmas Eve. And so, we're at my mom's house. And we're like, okay, well, I guess we have to go to Slayton. So at like 2 in the morning, we're leaving, driving over to Slayton, which is like 5 hours away. What are we going to do? We can't even buy heaters. We're collecting all the heaters we can find from my mom's house. We were going to stop at my house, and the city's on the way. Just like, what can we do to get until the day after Christmas, basically, when we can probably get a plumber out? We ended up finding someone who was able to, a poor plumber made the mistake of answering his phone like 2 in the morning when I kept calling. And it was very expensive, but he got out there and he got it at least like, so the leak wasn't, they cut off that pipe, and that pipe wasn't running water, and at least we could have the rest of them flowing. And but there was problem after problem there that we did not foresee happening, and it took so much time. Not to mention, we were self-managing 23 doors with tenants who, like automatic payments were pretty foreign to a lot of them. I was getting asked questions that are not like, literally, like I had tenants ask me how to fill out their unemployment forms and like if I could borrow them tinfoil and just like the weirdest. I mean, like it's like a different type of tenant. And yeah, so we ended up, we tried to sell that property over and over and over again, and it kept falling through. And finally, we sold it to somebody who does own other properties in the area on a contract for deed. And I think he's doing well with it. He wants to buy other properties from me, so he must not like hate it too much. But we finally ended up selling it, and it's been such a blessing.
The saying sometimes is, I think it's true, not always, but sometimes, that the best deal you've ever done is the one you didn't do.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's those that once you hook into them, it's tag, you're it. Now it's your responsibility.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Now you got to just get it off of you, right? And that can be really tough. But the debrief on Slayton, the debrief would be, okay, population. Let's start there. Demand for what you have.
100%.
That would be one big one.
And there was, I mean, it was. So it's hard for me to see something that I know on paper is a really good deal and just say no. On paper, Slayton was an amazing deal. On paper, Slayton should have been the best deal I ever bought. But the time and the energy and like the brain numbing, it just was so much time. So yes, more populated areas, 100%.
More demand, more services available to you should something go wrong.
Yes.
Like a real city with lots of plumbers, lots of roofers, lots of electricians.
Menards,
exactly. Management companies, many to choose from. Right, yeah. There's something about population and demand that builds at least a team around you, whether you know them or not yet. There's people around that can handle things. I think though too that enough Slaytons, just enough. It's like raising kids. You'd love for them to have some fender benders.
Yeah.
You don't want them to get in a head-on collision, but a few fender benders makes them a more cautious driver in life. Makes them more aware.
Yeah.
And I think Slayton has served itself because it has helped transition you probably forever out of the residential apartment / single family home world into a very, very focused world of commercial real estate. Is that overstated?
No, not at all. Really, it kind of broke me for residential. I am I do still have a few portfolios of apartments that I either manage or have third-party management that are much easier. But definitely, I was dealing with that at the same time that I had that awesome strip mall I was talking about. And, comparing them, it's like I love the strip mall. I love the tenants I'm meeting here. I love the mom and pop who are like starting their business. And I love this business relationship that we have and how we're helping each other with each other's goals. And with small town, rural, residential, that was not the same vibe, I guess. Yeah. So being able to contrast the two, 100%, I'm focusing on commercial and in much higher populated areas, much more dense population.
Let's back up a little bit. I want you to tell me more about, you mentioned Rafiq Moore, who, of course, I know well.
Yep.
And tremendous, wow, I'm thinking back of when Rafiq went to Power Players. It was probably 12 or 13 years ago. That would be my guess. But he's been a TA at Power Players. He's an accomplished business person.
Yeah.
How did you meet Rafiq? And tell me about that relationship of his role as a mentor in your life.
So I met Rafiq probably 3.5 years ago, I would say. I had, at that point, owned a few, I owned some residential properties. I was purchasing, I had one deal in cash, but it was $16,000. The rest of them were seller financing, so contract for deed. I was unable, because I did not have a W-2 and I didn't have 2 years of income as a realtor, to purchase things with traditional lending. And so
might have saved you in a sense.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, so after I started being an agent, I actually started working for a house flipping company. And so I really started to, we did a ton of rehab. So from, some of them were to the studs. And so I started to really understand that more, and then actually purchased my first house I lived in from the owner of that company on a contract for deed. And so I started kind of being the realtor that understood house flips and renovations. And I did understand construction costs, and I had done them myself at that point, and, had done a few flips with myself and Mike. And, and so I started working with these Russian investors, and they were referred to me from a contractor that I worked with. He said, hey, they're looking for a realtor to help them find more deals. I had hired him, and we liked each other, and so he referred me to them. And so I started working with them a lot. And we were finding a lot of good deals, and I, at this point, was starting to grow my network of off-market people who were selling homes and wholesalers, stuff like that. And so I learned from them that there was their money guy who, if they needed to borrow money, would come in as an investor, and essentially he would fund the deals, and then I would find the deals, and then they would remodel them, and then we would sell them. Sorry. And so, anyways, they talked really highly of this guy, and his name was Rafiq, and I had really no idea who he was, except for he would lend them money and finance their deals. And so, anyways, he actually started talking with them about who was their realtor they were working with, because he started liking their deals that they were doing and seeing that we were doing a lot more. And he was like, I'd love to be introduced to her. So they connected us, and he called me. And Rafiq, he talks like 1,000,000 miles a minute. He talks really fast. And so he called me probably like 5 or 6 times, being like, Alexandra, it's Rafiq. Yeah, I think you should come in. I gotta go. Hang up. And I'm like, who is this like crazy guy? Literally, he called me and hung up on me like so many times. I was like, okay, well, I've heard a lot of people speak
to me
highly.
once.
Yeah, I'm sure he did do that to you more than once. Yeah. But I was like, okay, everyone speaks highly of him. So finally we had a full conversation where he's like, I'd love you to come in and meet with you. So I went into his office, met with him. He explained to me that he still was doing quite a bit of house flipping too. He was more commercial, but he had a side business where they did house renovations. And he was looking for somebody to help him with his acquisitions and other contractors he worked with. So I thought it would be a really good deal. I liked him when I met him in person. I had a really good feeling about him. And then he mentioned to me that if I wanted to, I could partner with him 50-50. He would help me fund it, or he would fund it. I would do the renovations, and then we would sell the properties. And I remember going home and talking to my dad, and I was like, it's like seems like such a great thing. Like, I'm so excited. And my dad was like, well, usually if it seems too good to be true, it is. And so I was like a little worried and a little skeptical, but he's the one person I would say that, said all of these things. And I was like, this is too good to be true. And it was just real. That's really what he was offering. But I never wanted to have somebody put financing everything for me. So I was borrowing my half of the down payment. He would help me with the financing. And then we would renovate, starting off smaller properties and then 4-unit, 6-unit, and then sell. And we started building a business together of apartments. And so I think still to this day, Rafik and I probably own maybe around 200 apartment doors together. And he really helped me to not be scared. And also he was very, just do it. Like, you got it. You do it.
Confident.
You're confident. Yeah. We did a couple of good flips, made $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 quickly. And then he was like, you got it. Like, whatever you want to do, tell me and I'm in. And so, and lenders at that point still probably wouldn't have taken me seriously. But with him, who owned a huge portfolio, everyone knew who he was, suddenly I was also taken seriously, and I could essentially purchase what I wanted to purchase. Right. And I always performed, and I always, was the boots on the ground handling it. If I had questions or like something new came up, he had experienced it, and he was the mentor there when I had questions and, really fast answers, but I got my answers. And yeah, I'm really lucky to have met him.
That's, from my perspective, everybody that I've ever worked with, it's my hopeful goal that at some point down the line, their own success allows them to teach, help, mentor someone else. Isn't that how it's supposed to be?
Yeah.
Right. And so it's that whole story makes me happy, because that's the goal I have with everybody I get to work with, is that they become that person.
Yep.
For somebody else.
And he's actually who had me go to Power Players the first time. Yeah.
Well, he's pretty much sent everybody that he's ever worked with to Power Players.
Yep.
And his daughter, Julie, has been to Power Players twice before she's 19 years old. So that's crazy. Right?
Yeah.
She's not even 19 yet, I don't think. But she's been twice.
Yep.
And that's always a high compliment when somebody sends somebody they care about to work with that. That's tremendous. Let's insert another line. It's kind of a tough line, but we're right in that time frame. Tell me about your dad.
Well, my dad passed away about 3 years ago. He was awesome, really hardworking, really funny, really tough. He was really driven and never complained. He's very inspirational and awesome. He was a pilot, and he had so much fun too.
Pilot, just a private pilot, not for a profession.
Correct.
Right?
So he owned his own business. He had the rental properties, and through his business, he purchased first a Piper Arrow and then a Bonanza, so 4 to 6 seat planes. And we'd fly around as a family on weekends and get to go really cool places. And, he was very blue collar, I would say, and didn't really care about, he would buy these, he was so funny. He would buy, Sam's Club shirts that he always wore Sam's Club clothes and, cut off the sleeves of the sweatshirts and walk around looking like literally, if you see him, sometimes you would maybe think he was homeless, but he did really well for himself, and he just didn't care what people thought. And it was really cool to see. He really was a family guy. He wanted to hang out with family much more than friends. And yeah, he was awesome.
How old was your dad when he passed away?
He was 59. Yep. So he was given 2 to 5 years, and he lived for almost 10 years. And, you know, he wasn't able to fly during that time or anything, but he bought motorcycles and put them around the country. And he and my mom would, you know, bike around the country and the mountains and through Mexico. And he bought a cruiser in Florida. We would go there sometimes, a houseboat. He had he wanted to live his life to the fullest, and that was before he even got cancer. He was always really living. Working super hard, never just like laying around, not a TV guy, just like you would have loved him. Yeah.
And he would be very, very proud that you have recently gotten your pilot's license.
Well, not yet. Not my license yet. I've passed my written and I can solo.
That's
yes,
right.
Very
you're
close.
right there.
Yep.
Okay, so, but you have purchased your own plane.
Yes.
And your own hangar.
Yes.
And we had an event at your hangar, a real estate event, just a few months ago, this last summer.
Yep.
And that was amazing. And I could feel your dad there in spirit, proud of you that here's your hangar, you've got your plane, you're taking off in his shoes. And I got to meet your sister, and of course I know Jake, your brother has also been a TA at Power Players, and what a tremendous family. You know, when I see incredible kids, there's no accident. Right. I immediately want to know the parents, and I did get to meet your mom. Yeah. Amazing lady.
My mom's the best.
But I would have loved to have met your dad. Someday I'll get to meet him.
Yeah.
It's so under that umbrella, we all, when we're blessed, we have some really great influences. And we've heard about your dad, and we've heard about Rafiq. What other influences do you credit for your success? What books have you read that have changed you? What thoughts have you given a lot of time to of other people's thinking that have molded who you are and how you think and what you do?
I mean, really, as far as my real estate career goes, it's my parents, Rafiq, and you. Those are... And my brother, 100% my brother is in there too. My brother did real estate before I did. He quit college his freshman year and dropped out and bought his first investment property. And I was so upset. I was like, Jake, what are you doing? You need to get your degree. But he knew what he wanted to do. And he loves it just the same as you and I.
Right.
And he lives his life exactly how he wants to live it. And, you know, he's kind of like a no excuses guy too. And, you know, when I was teaching or whatever and not loving it, he would listen, but he's not one to be like, oh, like, just keep trying to, you know, Jake was kind of one like, well, you could do real estate too. You know, he kind of always would say stuff like that. And when I'd be looking, he's always like, well, then do it. And so 100% my brother. And then you have been a huge influence on my real estate career, and having you as a coach and Power Players. And also just like, it's so awesome. I feel like I have between you guys, like literally the smartest people that I could ask for, and people who want your best interest. And like, I have anything go on and I can call you, and, you know, like, you will help me, guide me through. And I feel like I can really make decisions with confidence because of the people who I have on my team.
I'm almost embarrassed to ask the question. I didn't see it going that way, but those are very, very nice things to say. I'm glad you're a part of the Power Players community, because, you know, when you first went to Power Players, you you tried to get lost before the event ever started. Would you like to recap that story for us,
So
please?
I did get lost.
I think it's the funniest story I've ever heard.
Oh my God. So in Power Players, I don't want to say too much, but there's a morning where you get to go and like walk around by yourself. And I was a runner. I still am a runner, but I like to run and I like to exercise. And so I was like, oh, well, I'll run during this hour. And so I was going to do it out and back and run 30 minutes one direction in the desert and then run back in the desert.
We're in Sedona, Arizona.
Yeah, Sedona. Yes.
Right.
And so I'm running and I'm enjoying myself and I'm thinking, and I maybe went like 35 minutes out because I was like, well, I can take a shortcut on the way back. I knew the way I could take the shortcut. And so I take this like what I thought was a more direct route back. And I'm running and I'm like, I don't like recognize anything. I'm in the middle of the desert. And all of a sudden I start seeing like clothes on the desert floor. And I'm like, what is going on? And there's just like scattered clothing. It's like, what is this?
The last body that was left there.
Yeah. And so I keep running and then I start seeing full suitcases. And I'm like, what am I running into? I'm running, hoping I'm not late for Power Players because Greg hates when anyone's late. And then I literally stumble on a body, and I think it's somebody sleeping there, but I did not check. What I think in my head happened was, I'm not even gonna go there. So immediately in my mind they're chasing me, and I don't think anyone was chasing me, but I am sure I'm being chased. I'm sure I can hear them, so I'm sprinting as hard as I can to get away from who I assume is chasing me, the person that I tripped over. And all of a sudden I literally like run and there's like a barbed wire fence. And so I'm like crawling under the fence and I'm running and all of a sudden I realize I'm completely lost. And I'm looking at my watch and I like officially should have been back. And you had during this Power Players like a dunce jar where if you like do something stupid, your name goes in it. And so, but I really like was scared also at the time. So I end up like finding the highest point I can find and I climb up it to see if I can see any roads or anything. Not a single road. I have only my Apple Watch on, no phone. I can't call anybody. And my watch had no service because my phone wasn't near it. And so then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to die out here, whether this person kills me or I just die of dehydration. So I'm walking and walking and walking. And I'm like really thick. It's getting later and later. And eventually, all of a sudden, I like run into a road. I was like, oh, okay. So then I was like, well, which way should I go? I had no idea. So I just took one direction and started walking. And I'm literally like trying to wave down people. No one stops for me, but there was like 3 cars that passed. But I would have stopped for me. And so anyways, I'm walking and I think I'm in the middle of nowhere. And then all of a sudden I like turn a corner and there's our hotel. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm at the hotel. So I sprinted to the hotel and I was like, I had like this crazy experience, but I'm like, do I go back in? Like, am I going to get yelled at? What do I do? And so then I like run in and you were like, name, jar. And I don't get to explain myself. I just had to write my name down and put it in the dunce jar. And then actually that night you made me sing karaoke from being in the loser jar. And I thought I would like get one up and sing tequila because I thought I could get away with not really singing. And instead I stood up there for like 6 minutes like an idiot just saying tequila over and over. It was not a good plan. It was a really long song.
There's a lot of time in between the tequilas.
Like very awkward. So that was my first experience with you. Yes. In the dunce jar.
Did you ever, contact anybody about the body in the desert and the suitcase?
I think I told you guys. I figure you guys probably did something with it. No, I just was happy to be back. And
you just had to get away from whoever was chasing you.
No, I really think in my mind, those were stolen from the hotel and brought out there and rifled through. And then someone was like sleeping there with it. But I have no idea.
Well, we were off to a good start.
Yes. It's like, oh, yeah.
It'll just be our story.
It's like day 2, I think.
Now that the world can hear it.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, my gosh. Okay.
Good times.
Switching gears back. the world of real estate, and specifically commercial, because that's
Yep.
where you're focusing, has what some would consider to be standard protocol. This is kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
They're listed represented properties, serious people put in an LOI. It goes from there to this, to that, to the other thing. And you get financiers, you put JVs together, you get various forms of syndications, often to all of this standard protocol that you are familiar with, that most people just assume this is the way it always goes on every deal. Do you think that way?
No, not at all. Yeah, and really the reason why I think Rafiq sent me to Power Players was to see that whole other side of deal structuring. And it's very interesting because I think especially in commercial, people assume that's the way. They think you can do, seller financing, creative financing with housing, but never with commercial. And certainly that is not the case. And really, I think especially now with rates going higher and people not really able to sell their buildings a lot of times, or the numbers not working even for, banks can't really lend out even as much money as they used to because the numbers don't work. Right. And so I think having the tools to be able to negotiate with seller financing and all of the different clauses we talk about in Power Players is going to be a huge advantage. And I don't want to speak about it because I don't know if we're going to get it or not. But, we are right now, and this wasn't me that did this negotiating. This was Rafiq, but hopefully going to be buying a pretty big commercial building for us both to move into with seller financing.
Right.
So, yep.
Right. I remember one of the very... I feel like I can speak about it because Rafiq has been up front in Las Vegas and a TA at Power Players speaking of it. But one of the very first deals when I was working with Rafiq one-on-one, that he started painting a picture of this deal and okay, well, I could immediately see how this would go together. And okay, we need to make this proposal. And he goes, okay, well, I'll give the guy a call, but he's hard to get a hold of. And I said, no, you're not going to give him a call. You're going to book a flight.
Yep.
You're going to Miami now, and you're just going to show up, and you're going to walk in, and you're going to spend as much time as he'll give you. And that very, very first deal was what got this all rolling.
And 100%. Yep. That is something that I have taken away from this, and really a big reason why we wanted the plane and why it's necessary too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't book these commercial flights and get off and take all of this time. And I'm not always going to places where there's a commercial airline, a commercial airport either. So
I feel like I have a little influence in all of that. Nikita is flying his plane. You got your plane. Rafiq is flying a plane. It's a tool, and it's a tremendous tool because getting face-to-face with people, looking at their life, their situation, what are they trying to solve, and having multiple ways of looking at a route. There's a lot of ways to get from point A to point B. Here's a way that would benefit you. Here's a way that would defer some taxes. Here's a way that we could put your equity and skip even estate taxes, put it in a generation skipping trust. All of the various tools that you learn to solve people's problems. And people that own big buildings that have big equities, oftentimes, they've got big issues that they're dealing with. Selling the building is just step one. Then they're stepping into, and if you can handle multiple layers of problem solving at the acquisition stage, they just say, thank you. This is amazing. But I guess the point for this isn't a real estate class. It's as much that I want people to understand that you think differently. I get asked all the time, how in the world has Alexandra got these results in such a short period of time, from the first little contract for deed house to 500,000 feet in 5 years? How? Well, I think there's a lot of answers to that, but but one of them is thinking about this sport differently, and the tools that are at your disposal when you think differently, and make no assumptions, and sit and listen face to face.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic to see that played out.
I think too, to add on to that, with seller financing, and when you're negotiating things that often they have not heard of before, to be able to be there face to face, you know, they're going to be working with you for a long period of time. So I think it builds trust. And when you can look someone in the eyes and they can meet you and they can understand you and you can understand them, and they can see and feel that you are legitimate and that you're not trying to scam them and you're not trying to manipulate them or take advantage of them, but this is the way it could work for both of us. I think it's a lot easier to build trust and relationships in that way. And there's no way to do that over the phone.
And no way to do that when you're filtering your thoughts oftentimes through a broker to the seller that you never meet.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I've invited many a broker to sit in on the meeting with the seller and just be a part of the conversation. It's not like I try to cut people out of it, but that connection, you're so right, that time to get to know the currency of your audience, and for them to know you, for them to really size you up and get a feel around you. We tend to think that, the word feeling and number crunching, they don't go in the same sentence, but when people evaluate go or no go, it's a package evaluation. It is left and right brain evaluation of, should I do this? And to leave this component out of the evaluation is just foolishness, especially when you're personable, you're aware, you know what you're talking about, you're fun. You know, you find the currency, and the next thing you know, you talk running or fishing or whatever for 3 hours. They go, oh my God, now let's get back to the property. And it's like you've advanced 10 notches up the deal board, and you've never even talked about real estate yet. Because you've developed this social currency that now they want to do things with you. They're looking for solutions versus playing that prove it to me kind of playing, right?
And also with commercial, a lot of, I would venture to say everybody who owns larger commercial assets is also an experienced investor in some ways, or they, at least they know somewhat what they're doing. They've had to get to that point. And so I think that a lot of times when they see you and your excitement, they really like it, and they like to learn how you're doing things. So I've had some really good conversations with investors who own way bigger portfolios than me, and it's really fun.
There are many of the people I'm blessed to know and have taught in power players who go on to focus in the commercial world, and there's all kinds of associations in the country of those who really decide to focus on certain things. And one of them is the commercial world. And you are, and many of the power players who've gone that route, a part of an organization called the Commercial Academy. And I can always tell when the annual meeting of the Commercial Academy takes place. And because they have the top attendees of the year award, and my phone starts exploding because you all think differently. You share a same language. I got sent a little video clip of Nikita up front, and he referred to the lettuce and tomatoes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
and I could see all these faces in the crowd like, what in the world is that?
Right,
and I just kind of smiled. It's just, but I think that when you think differently, then the tools apply differently. And this is something that I'm just really proud of all of you for how you're leading this commercial industry. Just like if we took the world of nightly rentals or Airbnb or land development or mobile homes, there's power players who've specialized in all of those areas who truly have forgotten more than anybody knows about it. It's just become their life, and this commercial world has become yours, and it's just you have agreement with it. I can just sit by looking
so
at the smile on your face. It just is you,
Yeah.
which is a challenge, I think, to everybody on this podcast. I literally could go on forever and ever and ever. I want to probe a little more personal area from left brain and deal structuring to the more personal, that you have an awesome husband, Mike, and Mike has a contracting business, or kind of businesses within the contracting world. How involved do you get in the contracting world? How involved does Mike get in the choices that are being made around investment real estate? How do you two work out these businesses and your involvement in each other's primary enterprise?
Yeah. Well, I run his whole roofing company. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not at all involved in it.
I've met his partner.
Yeah. No, so he has his business. He loves his business. They've grown it. And I really am not at all involved in that. The extent I'm involved in it is he will do roofs for me. So they do
Does
roofing,
he give you a
siding.
discount?
So sometimes I don't go with him. But usually he will give me a pretty decent discount. But I still get multiple quotes every time, just in case. It is a business.
You got to keep these subcontractors honest.
Yes. No, but it is really nice. And also he does a lot with insurance. So if it's an insurance claim, run the numbers up. I don't know. But yeah, so we work together in the way that he will, help me with roofing, siding. I just won a smaller, it's a 7,500 square foot commercial building on an auction site just 2 days ago. And I asked Mike if he wanted to do it with me because he's slower in the winters. And I was like, okay, we'll just flip this quick. I think I already have a tenant for it. Throw the tenant in. It'll be a really good, I own another strip mall right by it, so I know exactly what it'll rent for. And then we'll sell it and put that in our joint account. But other than that, we'll do a few things together as far as real estate goes. But he definitely lets me do the real estate, and then he does his construction company. In the beginning, when I first was doing house flips, he would help out a lot. I was like with Hillsdale, even my first house I ever did, I was going there all the time, and he was probably there half the time with me, just because he was a good boyfriend.
I was going to say it had nothing to do with construction.
Yeah. No, but it was fun. In the beginning, we were flipping fourplexes and, smaller houses, and they're really late at night working with our power, tools. And it was a good experience. But then really I took off with real estate, and he started his company. And I think it's been really good for us to have our separate things too. Yeah.
As you guys perhaps in the future will start growing a family, do you anticipate any major changes with how you do things, or people you might need to bring on, or any of those things in the future?
So actually, I've thought this out a lot, and Mike and I talked, and what we've decided to do is we want to purchase a building where my company, Financially Free, will go in there, and his company will go in there. And then we're also going to put a daycare in there. And, it'll be some area in between where my girls are and then his guys that work with him, somewhere in the middle there. And we actually might have a property that we'll be getting, but so I told a bunch of people that I wanted to do this. This is that deal I was talking about. One of those people, of course, being Rafiq. Well, Rafiq has a verbal yes to a deal, and so he would maybe move in there. Mike and I would both move in there, and then we'd fill up the rest of the space, and we'd do that as a 50-50 venture with him.
And one of those spaces would have a daycare, so that
we'll put a daycare in there. So this one is an office building, so definitely daycare is the number one tenant we would need. If we end up doing a strip mall if this one doesn't work out. I'd like to have a coffee shop in there and a gym. Oh, the building we're buying does have a gym, so that'd be nice. But yeah, I think this industry is so cool because you can literally like build it exactly how you want your life to be. And I would like to have my husband in the same building as me, but not shared space. I would like to have a daycare in there too, because I want to be a good mom, but I also don't want to give up my career. And, you know, if we can bring our kids there, I'll bring my dog with me everywhere I go still. And we put our kids in daycare when they need to be in daycare, or they can be with mom or with dad. We're all there. I think it's just, why not do it? We can.
Why not? Yeah.
So we will.
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only next best thing, I think, is for this building with the offices, the daycare, the gym, the coffee shop to also be on a runway somewhere.
Yeah, I know,
so
right?
You can keep your plane there.
Yeah.
Then
amazing.
you can, you know, just head
Take
out
off.
and head back.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, we'll have to drive like 20 minutes to get to our plane still, but it'll be fine.
You know, the phrase, the phrase that has been in my head since about 1976 when I first read it is this idea of living deliberately, a Thoreau quote.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And you just described it right there. It's by design, proactively by design, customized to you and your life and exactly who you are and how you think and what you want. And no two lives are the same.
Yeah.
So the customized, deliberate, purposeful life, which brings us full circle to the word we started was this agreement. You're in agreement with who you are in your life. All legs are kicking in sync per your design. And I think that that's also the challenge at the end of the day, the consider that I'd like to end this with is a quote that I've had on my board up in the office for quite a number of years now. But it's actually a line in a movie that I had to rewind about 5 times to get it exactly right. But it simply says that with every passing moment, there's another chance to turn it all around. That we're never locked into doing it any one way. That we can evaluate and we can look at life and we can transition to a better plan, a better idea, something that we're more passionate about, something that is going to challenge us more, something that makes us more alive. And that idea that we get to choose. I think about where would you be right now if you were still teaching English in a setting where you'd be doing a great job. You'd win the Teacher of the Year award, I'm sure. But would you be fully feeling what life is all about?
And to be honest, I don't think I would be winning that award because it wasn't where my heart was.
Right. Yeah.
This is where my heart is.
Yeah. Well, I just love that you've made that transition and that you're in sync, you're in agreement. And I can't thank you enough. This podcast, as people have listened, I hope, to Podcast Zero, the primary objective for this is to showcase amazing, amazing people to the world that I'm able to deliver to them and for them to learn and to be challenged and to grow. So thank you, Alexandra, for delivering, over-delivering. And now I get to take you and Mike out to dinner, and thank you that way too.
Thank you. No, it was awesome.
It's awesome.
Good
God bless you
background,
all.
yeah.
Thank you for being with me again.